Hi everybody, Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio. Back we go to the geyser of ingenuity and challenge known as the YouTube comments section. Although I am occasionally, of course, catty, and by that I mean I'm generally catty, I really do appreciate these comments coming in. So let's start with my video on the pizza war, about whether or not the owners of a pizza parlor have the, quote, right to not serve pizza at a gay wedding. Alf wrote, very bad argument, naughty argument, spanking for the argument, time out for the argument. He wrote, very bad argument. There's a clear difference between discrimination in the marketplace and discrimination in your personal preference. Yes, you have a right to discriminate in making a choice to buy products and services and in your personal preferences. But the system should be set up in a way that minimizes or even eradicates discrimination in offering goods and services in the economy. If a firm decides to participate in the marketplace, then they shouldn't discriminate. If they're allowed to, then where can the line be drawn? Should firefighters, doctors, and pharmacies be allowed to discriminate? Okay, so obviously there's a mismatch of standards here. If I'm allowed to boycott goods, but people who provide those goods are not allowed to boycott me, then we have two standards for the seller and for the buyer, which fails the test of universality kind of required for a moral argument. Now, what are you going to do to the people who discriminate? Are you going to throw them in jail? Are you going to put guns against them if they resist? Are you willing to surround them if they take hostages? Are you willing to shoot them if they shoot back? Because every time you say these shouldn't, it's not just a good idea. It ought to be a law. It ought to be a law. Well, you're unleashing the weapons of the state. And as we saw, if the recent shooting of Walter Scott is any indication, the state can be pretty brutal. And, this whole escalation may have arisen because debtor's jail still exists for men who are behind on child support payments, which may have been the precipitating fear or caution that caused them to run and have the officer shoot him. Absolute tragedy. But that's the way it goes, right? Every time you invoke the state, a police officer has the legal right to escalate force until you submit or you are dead. So I would actually rather there be some discrimination around than have more shootings like that, because that's really what we're talking about. And the other thing, too, is that, let's say firefighters, are they allowed to discriminate? Let's talk about a perfectly free society, private fire department, and so on, competing private fire department. Now, two representatives come to your house. Let's say that you are against, you don't like homosexuals, right? Two representatives for the fire department come to your house because you just moved in, and they say, hey, we'd like to sell you for $20 a year protection against fire. Any fire that happens, we will come out and put it out. And one guy says, we'll put out any fire from anyone, anywhere in the neighborhood. Any fire. Your neighbor's house burns down, we will come and put that fire out. And the other guy says, well, we don't put the fires out of homosexuals. However, how they'd know that, I don't know. Maybe men buy firefighter calendars? I don't know. But would you really want the firefighting brigade that would not put out the gay house fire? No, of course not, because the gay house fire could spread to your house. What about a doctor? So, well, we treat everyone, but we don't treat Mormons. It's like, well, what if a Mormon gets sick with a communicable disease in my neighborhood? I kind of want that guy treated. So people who are willing to have their house burned down for their prejudices or get sick with a deadly ailment for their prejudices are really, really, really rare. So most people would rather service providers provide to everyone because of the collective security and positivity of that situation. So I don't think you really have to worry too much about it. And look, if you want people to not discriminate, as I do, make the case. Make the case for them. I mean, just go talk to them and say, here's why discrimination is wrong. Here's why it's inefficient. Here's why it's bad. Here's why it's disruptive. Here's how it's hurtful, and so on. Go and make the case. This invocation of the magical power of the state to make people do what you think they ought to do when they're not initiating force against anyone. Refusing service is not the initiation of force. This idea that we just call in this airstrike of government power whenever we find something that is objectionable to us is really, really pitiful. It's like invoking Odin to prove where life came from, or to establish the origins of life or the universe. Zeus sneezed us. It's just this magical thing that we call in whenever we find something disagreeable, but it's infinitely more civilized to make the case, particularly when making the case in the public sphere is as easy as it is now. Make the case. Go talk to people and say, here's why discrimination is bad. Work to convince them. Up your rhetorical skills, fix up your arguments, go and have those personal challenging conversations with people in your neighborhood. Don't just hide in a little booth and put an X and let someone else do violence against people you disagree with. That is cowardly. That is despicable. That is vile. That is brutal. Go make the case. Honestly. You know, if you think of discrimination as a woman, anti-discrimination as a woman you want to date, go and, you know, put yourself in your Sunday best and go and ask her out. But don't just have people kidnap her and deliver her to your basement. I mean, that's just horrible. So yeah, if there's things that you don't like in society, like discrimination, fantastic. Go and make the case. I mean, I really dislike spanking. I really dislike, and I'm not going out there advocating for people who spank their children to be thrown in jail. I go out and make the case, even though there's a good case to be made that spanking is the initiation of force. I go make my case. I go and make my case. You do the same. Stop calling in the blades of the state for people with whom you have a fundamentally aesthetic disagreement. That is brutal, and you are completely in the wrong if that is your approach. Again, from a guy named Sharky, or a man or woman named Sharky. He made the appeal to insecurity on YouTube. You see this quite a bit. We're going to do a whole show about things, passive-aggressive, annoying things on comments. He wrote, "Sorry to see this attitude, Steph. I've seen you argue many a suspect point," which is fair enough. "But for once, you've chosen to spin a subject I'm fairly well informed on. And the term cringeworthy is barely cutting it. It's a big subject and tough to give a balanced view on this. But this didn't cut the mustard." So I'm not cutting the mustard. Cutting the cheese, yes. Cutting the mustard, no. And this, you get a lot of comments like this. And if anytime you do anything in the public sphere, you get a lot of comments like this. "I know infinitely more than you, Steph. And you're so wrong, I don't even know where to begin. So, bye." I'm going to tell you that you're wrong in very abstract ways. I'm going to repeat that you're wrong, but I'm never going to quite get round to actually showing you that you're wrong. And that is just, it's an appeal to insecurity, like, "Oh no, I've disappointed an anonymous person who claims vast knowledge, but hasn't actually given me any rebuttal. Oh no, what am I going to do? How am I going to choke down my Cheerios this morning?" Well, I think I'll find a way. I think it's funny. And, you know, the people who got the most hostile about my defense of the value of marriage, you know, may not be the worst idea to stay single. Because this guy would be, you know, if you're going to criticize someone, yeah, fine, go for it, you know. Tell me how I'm wrong, tell me where I'm wrong, I'm happy to hear feedback and so on. But if you're just going to insinuate that I'm wrong and then run away, you'd be a really annoying person to be married to. I mean, it's basically like inappropriate, whoosh, offensive, whoosh, wrong, whoosh, bad, whoosh. I mean, it's just whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. I don't know. It's like sprinting around in a revolving door and thinking you're climbing a mountain. I mean, just, you know, if you're not going to tell me how I'm wrong, telling me that I'm wrong makes you wrong. Next from my video, white male privilege. Somebody writes, "What if you have a philosophy that isn't an expression of universal principles? You're basically saying that all philosophies operate with universals. Not true. Nihilism, relativism doesn't have any universal principles." I think he means don't. "It's the rejection of such principles and an acceptance of a stance that tries to take no position. The definition of philosophy can easily be demonstrated by its etymology, philo, and sophi, Sophia. It's the love or strong appreciation for something. Sophie or Sophia is the Greek word for knowledge or wisdom." Yeah, philosophy is the love of wisdom. Absolutely. And they thought the world was flat. That doesn't mean that we take those definitions currently. So what you're basically saying that all philosophies operate with universals. Yes. And not true, nihilism or relativism don't have any universal principles. Well, first of all, that's not true. Nihilism says that there are no universal principles, and that is their universal principle. Relativism says that everything is relative, and that is their universal principle. They don't say some things are relative and some things are not relative. They say everything is relative. So they do have universal principles. But the fact that they reject and affirm universal principles at the time means it's just bad philosophy. You know, if I'm a biologist and I say that a tree is a mammal, I'm just a really bad biologist. And what I'm putting forward is more deranged ranting than it is biological accuracy. So, yeah, philosophies operate with universals. And that's not, I mean, it's like physics operates with universals, which is why there's no physics of culture or rap appreciation or that which is attractive to the opposite sex around the world. That's not physics. Physics deals with universals. Numbers, mathematics, engineering, these all deal with universals. And the degree to which they don't deal with universals is the degree to which whatever that is not part of that discipline. Yes, philosophy deals with universals, and the purpose of philosophy is moral universals. That is really the purpose of philosophy. Now, there's a huge amount that goes into that, but the purpose of philosophy is in the same way that the purpose of medicine is the prescription of some change in behavior that promotes or maintains health, right? I mean, there's no point doing all this research on dropping things into mice bodies and all of these trials and so on if it never produces anything that can be prescribed or a behavior that can be changed to further promote or maintain human health. The whole point of medicine is to promote changes which help health. Same thing with philosophy. There's lots of work that goes into the background of philosophy, but the purpose of philosophy is to produce meaningful change that promotes virtue and happiness, right? It's the old Socratic argument. Reason equals virtue equals happiness. If you're more rational, you can be virtuous. Reason is consistent and universal. Morality is consistent and universal. If you are rational, you can be moral. If you are moral, you are most likely to be happy. It's not a certain guarantee. For instance, in nutrition and health and so on, if you eat well and exercise, you are more likely to be healthy. It's not a certain guarantee. You could just get some weird cancer or be hit by a bus, but it is your most certain guarantee of these things. So, yeah, I've made the case, I've made the definition that philosophy is universal, and the purpose of philosophy, right, the end game, so to speak, of philosophy is virtue. And that's the one thing, happiness, you could say, really, in the end, right? That's what Aristotle said about happiness. We don't get happiness in order to get something else. We do everything else in order to achieve and maintain happiness. But of course, philosophy in an irrational and often anti-philosophical world cannot guarantee you happiness, but it can guarantee you accuracy, universals, truth, and virtue. And it's to everyone's decision the degree to which the pursuit of virtue in a world often antagonistically opposed to virtue is worth it. That's up to everyone. If you are in a culture that worships fat and you decide to lose weight, you are going to be shamed and possibly stoned, but it is the degree to which you want to be able to climb more than one flight of stairs without passing out. That is your degree of commitment. I myself believe you go all the way with virtue and the world comes behind you, because the world is fundamentally coasting on inertia and indifference and irrationality. And most people are so conditioned to follow a leader that they will pursue anybody who is the most certain and the most vocal. And that's the approach that I take. So that not so they follow me, but so they follow me to philosophy so that they can think for themselves. So that's my answer to that. I hope that helps.